Hey, what's up, Canada? Welcome back to the show, everybody from Canada and beyond. Tonight, we've got a special treat, something that's been a long time in the making. Doug Force is going to join us today. Most of you, or many of you, will know Doug from his years and years of work with The Myth is Canada. There's a lot of information and a lot of education going on, but tonight we're going to start and take a look at things from a little bit of a different perspective. And we're going to unpack some of the cover-ups, a little less on the education. You guys can all find the education, and we'll direct you to the education you need to know to how to remedy a lot of this, and we'll touch on a lot of that. But it's the cover-ups that I want people to understand and see more of and get more truth and information on. So this is kind of a bit of the approach that we're going to take on helping people understand some of the issues that we're facing. So I'm not going to waste a lot of Doug's time or anybody else's time. We're going to keep it kind of unpack it as quickly as we can, and we'll come back to another show to follow up and answer questions and things like that from that point forward. So to start on the cover up, I'm gonna play a little another quick little video here for you, and then we're gonna bring Doug in and we'll dive into it from there. All right, that's kind of the point I wanted to get across. Tail that off. I know this will create some discussion. Welcome to the show, Doug. This has been a long time in the making. Thanks for joining us tonight. Oh, we've lost your mic.
There we go. I have to turn it on. It's one of these new overhead things that sometimes I forget to turn it on and start talking. I'm still getting used to all this new stuff.
No worries. It's all good.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I appreciate it. And yeah, I was going to say that the first time I think we met was last summer up in Ottawa. And at Dan's C3, little to do that they really jacked him around on. He was initially had permits to do it on the lawn of the Parliament, and then they pulled his permits a week before, and then he had to scramble to even just put on what he did put on last year, which was amazing for what they did.
Well, that may have been the first time that we got to meet, but through your work, I had met you actually a long time prior to that. Not a long time, within a couple of years, but I kind of stumbled across your work quite a while before we met. So that was actually, for me, it was a great moment. And that day there, you gave a very short 5-minute speech that really, really, really resonated with me to the point where I had to go and buy a T-shirt, which is something I don't generally do, but I did that day because I was so moved by the short speech that you had given. The unfortunate part of it was that there was so much wind and so much heckling noise from the bandit crowd that I couldn't get a really great recording of it. So at some point, you know exactly which 5-minute speech that you gave that was. But
Well, and gosh, I needed something, and I watched. Take a couple of minutes here. I watched a video on how to get, because I'm not usually a public speaker, and it's kind of something I've now been, even back then I was thrown into because I did the research. So my friend said, well, you go ahead and talk about it. You know more about it than we all do. So I'm not really a speaker or a writer, but anyways, I wrote that after I watched this how to give a speech YouTube video, and he says the number one way to give a speech is start with a story once upon a time. And so I wrote the story of Canada as once upon a time from 1867 through to modern day. And you're right, it was like 5 minutes, and it was a lot of fun to do as well. My one error is I invited somebody up on stage and gave them the mic, and he never gave it back.
well, you know, what struck me about that is I'd been tripping through this information for more than a decade, trying to sort this out. I had looked at, I'd been a student of history my entire life. I had looked at all of these things. I had heard and come across things like Will Rogers Smith, and I knew about the Magna Carta, and I knew about all of these things, but there was no way for me to connect the dots, to understand the timeline and the implications. And in 5 minutes there, you made it as clear as day to somebody like me that, even as much as I looked at these things, I was probably more confused than somebody that knows nothing about it.
Well, and thank you for that. I've actually rewritten it, the Once Upon a Time, and we're actually going to record it as a fireside chat. I just have it with this COVID-19 and all the stuff that's going on around there. We've been set back. I did a new tutorial video. I'm going to be re-releasing the tutorial videos that I did last fall, 6 now with a new one, with a 7th one. But I need to go into a recording studio to do it, and it's just been hell for the last 3 months here in Toronto. The ridiculousness of it all, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better here. The stupidity. Now they're going to force people to wear these masks on the Toronto transit system. It becomes mandatory on July the 2nd.
On that note, I had just before dinner tonight had done a 1-minute explainer video that pretty much destroys the sanity of that whole mask thing. I spent 15 years as a firefighter breathing through apparatuses that were incredibly monitored and controlled to make sure that we were breathing at a normal atmospheric pressure. Our lungs have only evolved to work at a normal atmospheric pressure. These masks are suicide based on that fact alone. Any diver, any firefighter knows this. This is the point of these regulating systems on all of the safety equipment that we use. So that tells people pretty much in a minute what I think of this whole scenario. So I guess to back it up here now, I made everybody suffer through that 1-minute video. To start the cover up with one word: de facto. Kick it off there, The most misunderstood word in Canada, I'm sure.
Well, and even Harper used the word. The Governor General, Payette, her name, I think was her name, she called herself a de facto head of state. Harper actually called the government that he was the prime minister of a de facto government. And it means, very simply, in fact. And not lawful, not legal, but just in fact. Because as you said, in 1931, we were given the right to seat a federal authority by the Statute of Westminster, and they decided that they didn't want to lose their power and their wealth by allowing the people to make that decision, and they said, no, the Dominion of Canada lives on, and they became de facto at that point unlawful. It wasn't until 1982 that Trudeau went over to Great Britain with the Canada Bill and came back with the Canada Act, and then also the Constitution Act, 1867. The funny thing is that the Constitution Act 1867 is nothing but a photocopy of the original British North American Act 1867, which still remains in their archives to this day, by the way. We only have a photocopy in our archives. Oh, yeah.
My best friend lives in London, and I've sent him on a mission to go and actually photograph this document. So I'm looking forward to seeing some pictures from some of our archives relating to Canada.
The PDF that's up on the Myth is Canada's website is actually a copy of the one in the UK archives, and I put that on there specifically so that people, if you go to the Canadian archives, it's actually different document. It in the way that it's set up. The way that the one that comes out of the UK archive still has all the coat of arms and that kind of stuff on it. The photocopy that they gave Trudeau on his way out, I think he might have even picked it up at the gift shop for all we know.
Well, so basically what you're confirming for me is that my nose is on the right track, having my friend go there to physically actually take photographs of this too. I mean, this is all part of the cover-up, and this is what everything is going to come back to the cover-up, and it's going to bounce back and forth through the cover-up from until the current day. But the de facto comes into play in 1931. But the cover-up has been going on a lot longer in Canada than 1931. Now, we've set a couple of dates here that you've mentioned. 1931 was when the de facto started. In 1982, Trudeau perpetuated the fraud. Well,
and what happened was he came back with a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is nothing more. If you charter something, you're chartering a corporation. In this instance, that's a maritime incorporation document. And within that charter, it was supposed to, they did a proclamation. Now, the Queen did a proclamation, which is the same as giving it royal assent, except she put subject to Section 59 being repealed. Well, Section 59 leads to Section 58, leads to Section 23.1. And if you look at 23.1, it basically deals with language being English only. English and French, and they said, well, you got to repeal that in order for this to become supreme law. Well, Quebec would never agree to having only English as the common language taught in all the schools across Canada. Of course not. And so it has never actually been given royal assent. In other words, subject to Section 59 being repealed, I will write a new proclamation, or the Governor General would write a new proclamation, and hence creating this to be supreme law in Canada. Not supreme law of the land, but supreme law, meaning on the water. Well, it's never happened. So not only are they unlawful, but they're also illegal, because their the document that gives them the power to be at sea actually has never been ratified or never been given royal assent. So it's a double whammy. Not only are they de facto unlawful, but they're also de facto illegal.
And to me, now I read when I'm as I understand and dig more into the subject, going back to the fraud and the criminal side of it, this is where to me I'm starting to see this as blatant fraud. Mr. Trudeau, being of his origin and descent, had to have known there was not a snowball's hope in the hotspot that the French would ever secede their language to strictly English.
Well, it actually 23.1 talks about the languages being taught in schools, not the French English across the country. But if that had been repealed, the only language teachers would have been able to use in all the schools across Canada was simply English, period.
And there is no way anyone in Quebec would have supported that. And they knew this going into this.
Oh, yeah.
So how many millions of dollars were spent on this fraud? I don't think we could even calculate that, because to me, this is, to put it in layman's terms, this is fraud.
Well, and the whole idea of getting this done was a finalization. They knew that trouble was brewing. There was, in 1971, there was a constitutional convention in Victoria, British Columbia, that they got together with the various premiers from across the province, and they held a constitutional convention to seat a de jure government in Ottawa. And Trudeau was actually at that convention.
Now, you're seeing me getting antsy in my seat here now. It's because this is some of what we're seeing some people try to initiate across the country right now. There's different groups of all persuasions that are working on this concept or these ideas from different angles and from, in different regions and whatnot. Some of them are working together, some of them are working independently, and this is where differentiating what these people are and what you do is something very different. You are a resource platform with the information, with the documentation, all of the proof, all of the evidence is what you are about giving to the world. You are not running around giving orders and telling people what they have to do. You are a resource platform, which, quite frankly, from my experience and everything that I've been doing in the last couple of years, a lot of these people are taking and using your information as a source of material. This is why you're here and they are not. I want to provide the information, the education, and the resources, not to get into debates about the solutions. At the end of the day, I want all of Canadians to have the ability to make an informed decision on the right information rather than getting into debate about the semantics of enforcing and placing that.
Well, and that's really what we do now. We've gone from, I started out a couple of years ago. I thought I could make a documentary film, and I was only going to do it if I could get people to donate to make the movie, and bums in the, in order to get bums in the seats of the theaters, I thought it would be better if we did it just through donations. So I actually, last year, I started out, pumping this, and it wound up that I actually, over a whole bunch of interviews, I actually gave you all the information. At the end of the summer, we became a movement last year, and it was a moot point to continue on trying to do this documentary. On top of that, we weren't getting any donations in anyways, because I kept forgetting to ask for donations every time I get on the air. So it was like, oh crap, oh, I forgot again. Oh well, it didn't matter at that point. Things had changed so dramatically, and all the information was out there. I came up with an idea to do tutorial videos for people to put it into bite-sized chunks, which we did at the end of the summer and early fall last year, and they went like crazy. They sold like hotcakes. So I'm going to redo them this year because the voiceover on them wasn't as good as it could be, and so I'll get those out later this year.
Ever improving is part of the process, right?
Well, and Sean and I are going to tear apart the website this week. We're going to there's some new information that I found, an act from 1878 called the Revocation and Letters Patent Act that was they hid this away very nicely in a book. I could say that, wow, did they ever not want anybody to find this? But I read books.
Right. So how many years have you got into this now, and you're still finding information that they're covering up?
Yeah, this is the 14th year. Yeah, 14 years. Yeah.
How can any of us expect to have any kind of education or knowledge about the state of the situation or this cover-up that's been going on? The cover-up itself has been going on for 89 years.
Yeah. Well, and what they do, if you don't have to spend 14 years doing it. I did that. You can go to the Mythos Canada website, and we put the timeline up there with the documents you can download. If you downloaded each and every document on there, it would probably take you 3 months to read them, not 14 years. But you don't have to do that. We've got enough videos up on Brighteon that you can go through there. If you want, you can still order the tutorial videos from last year. They go from 8 minutes up to 12 minutes. There's six of them. And I break down the documents for you. So you can go out of the website, download the documents, and go along with the pertinent clauses that apply to what's going on. So I made it much easier for people to understand. And now we're doing these Zoom module calls because once you understand what's happened, it becomes very obvious and common sense kicks in. I know common sense is not as common as we'd like to think, but it does kick in, and it's obvious what needs to be done. And there's a proper methodology to do that. And without getting too deeply into it, basically, all the provinces and territories are sovereign nations due to the fact of 82 and what Trudeau did by creating incorporations and taking them now to, in a de facto sense, all the provinces became de facto at that point. We have to seat de jure in each province, and then there's a process of how to do that through creating a constitutional convention, electing your delegates, having the delegates create the constitution, putting it up for the people to decide on, then bringing it back in, and then over a short period of time. Usually, today you can do that over a 2 or 3 month period, maybe even faster. Then put it up for ratification. When a certain amount of people vote for it, then now you've got your social contract, your constitution that creates a de jure government. And we teach people also, Wayne, that we have to put transitional clauses in these constitutions. It's so important that we have to because if we just suddenly said, okay, we're in a de jure government, everybody that worked for the de facto government is now unemployed, you would find each province suddenly go into a massive depression. You can't just, the federal government under Dr. Tam did just that. She said everybody has to stay home. And look where we are today.
And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people shy away from this discussion and this knowledge is their fear of the uncertainty of the transition itself. And there again, if more of us, and this goes back to the cover-up, if they had not been hiding our own history from us for so long, covering it up to cover their own, what's really now a crime spree that's going on for 40 years, that we are ultimately, in their mindset, going to be responsible for footing the bill on. And here Canadians are now, because of this cover-up, more than $1 trillion in debt and growing.
Actually, it's 1.4 trillion. And by the way, 2 words, just 2 simple words: odious debt.
I love those words. Those are my 2 most favorite words right now. And this is again, whereas people go, what does that mean? What are these words? Okay, to break it down and keep it simple, we've gone over de facto. It just means not real, basically illegal or fraudulent.
Well, it actually means that the tyrant who created the debt and tries to push it on the people, odious debt actually under international law belongs to him. So Mr. Trudeau, who created the $1.4 trillion debt, not only do we get to seize do the bankers get to seize your trust fund, but you're also your foundation. Also, Krista Freeland, all her wealth is gone. Climate Barbie, all of these guys that are part of that government structure that has created this debt, it actually belongs to them. They were the tyrants. And we don't have to pay it, they do.
This is why the cover-up is so important. This is why they will stop at nothing to keep us from learning this and empowering ourselves with enough information to stop this. They're culpable and accountable by their own actions. All we have to do is stop them.
Well, and like I say, I've always said we've had the right since 1931 through the Statute of Westminster that ended the Dominion of Canada. And how do we know it ended? Because England never sent another Governor General with his letters patent, the British North American Act. And the British North American Act letters patent created the Dominion of Canada. Without the Governor General and without his letters patent, the Dominion of Canada literally ceased to exist. That's why it went full de facto. They said, oh, nothing changed, nothing changed. Really? So where's your Governor General? Where's his letters patent? And Earl of Bessborough, March of 1931, was the last Governor General to Canada. He returned to England on December the 12th with his letters patent and turned them back in. They were never in Canada's possession because they didn't belong to Canada. They are the Dominion of Canada. They didn't belong to the Dominion of Canada. That's why in 82, the word patriate was created, a new word for the English language, patriate, to bring for the first time.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't know that.
So Trudeau brought the British North American Act for the first time to Canada.
What is it with this family and inventing words? Right? It's like father, like son.
Well, I don't know. Was Pete really the father, or was it Fidel?
Well, I'm sure Fidel was inspiration for some new words. I'm not sure. I'm sure maybe if we look into it, maybe he's got a few new ones to his credit too. I'm not sure. So now my question is here now. We're $1.4 trillion in debt. If we decide to, as a people, because it has to be the people that have to do this, we don't
Absolutely.
live in a Marvel comic book world. There is nobody that is going to come and save us. Whether you like Trump or not is irrelevant. Trump is not going to come and save us. It's not his job. He knows this, as well as everybody else knows this. The United Nations know this. And this brings up a very interesting point that you brought up in a private chat that we were having the other night, that for me was like getting struck with an anvil. And it was just even more evidence that the United Nations is fully aware of what's going on and how oblivious the rest of the world is, not just Canadians. So don't feel bad about, in Canada about not knowing this. The world didn't realize it. They still decided to get up and vote in a fraudulent vote for Mr. Trudeau to have a Security Council seat when, Doug, tell the people why you knew he would never ever get it and why Harper never got it.
Canada's not a sovereign nation.
And it was like getting hit with a hammer when you told me that the other night. It was like, of course. Of course.
Well, and people will try to argue, well, no, Canada has to be a sovereign nation. I said, and there's only, and what I say to people is this. I say, okay, so let's go to the Interpretations Act. You got to have land under your feet, right? So the Interpretations Act, under Canada, it's their definition of Canada. It says includes the internal waters and external seas. And then the maxim of law is the inclusion of one is the exclusion of all others. So what is Canada? Canada is the internal waters and external seas, no land under their feet. Oh, the Parliament buildings in Ottawa actually belong to the province. The federal government pays $2.7 million a year in rent. They don't even own their own Parliament buildings. The Queen of Canada, okay, we have to go to the Oceans Act to see where her jurisdiction is, because in the Oceans Act, it says she has jurisdiction on all land or seabed. She has jurisdiction on the seabed, which means all land underwater. So she has no land under her feet, unless, of course, she's a mermaid. The most important thing that you do as a sovereign nation, you will be able to do one thing, two words, eminent domain. You'll be able to claim eminent domain. Well, the Queen of Canada has management privileges only through the Indian Act and through the Parks, et cetera, Act, Federal Parks Acts and so forth, but that's management. And same with the federal and provincial governments, they only have management over the land. We know that in 1931, that the Court and Chancery that held allodial title to the land in Canada on behalf of the British Empire, we know that it was given over to Queen Victoria in 1868 under the deed of Rupert's Land Act. She received it in heredity and perpetuity, or through successions, et cetera. What she did is she turned that over to her colony, the Dominion of Canada. And the Dominion of Canada then settled the land, hence claiming allodial title. That title was still held by the British Empire until 1931 in a little thing called the Court and Chancery. The Statute of Westminster released that. The Court and Chancery gave the land to us, we the people, because a fiction can't own land in allodium, but the people do, and we own all the land in Canada. It was turned over to us in 1931. Why, you must ask? Why would they do that? Well, they expected Canada to hold a constitutional convention from across the provinces and territories and seat a de jure federal government that would then join the British Commonwealth.
So why were they expecting this constitution in 1931? Why did they address this before it happened?
Well, they did in the imperial conferences. They held imperial conferences from 1907 till 1930. And this was all gone through the imperial conferences. They were talking about releasing all of their dominions. The empire was in the midst of collapsing. And so they had a problem financially. And so what they needed to do was relieve themselves of their colonies, because their colonies were dragging them down into this collapse. And in order to do that, they needed the colonies to become sovereign nations. And the only way that they could do that was to hold a constitutional convention and seat a de jure government. And so New Zealand and South Africa, the Irish Free State, they all did that, except in Canada, because the Mandarins out in Ottawa went, holy crap, if we give into this, we're going to lose all our wealth and all our power, and we might as well just go to Starbucks and grab a couple of empty cups and go ask for quarters on the corner. Because that's...
At that point, you're referring mostly to the Laurentian elite circle that people kind of vaguely know a little bit about. But
them and the Privy Council, the permanent secretaries. When you get elected, you don't run your department. Okay, when you get there, you're a politician. You don't have any administrative knowledge on how to run the Ministry of Defense. Oh, you got elected. You're new electee, and you're the Minister of Defense that's been there for 60 years, okay? Who do you think runs those? Those are the mandarins. These are the permanent secretaries. These are the permanent administrators that run these departments. Yes, the politician is a figurehead. He's there, he's appointed usually by the Prime Minister, but they don't they don't do any of the work. You think
they're the interchangeable pieces. They're interchangeable pieces, and the others are the cogs in the wheel or driving the finances behind it.
Well, and a lot of these people at the time that the Dominion was ended had been there 30, 40 years. These guys were careers. This was their political. There's a great show you guys could watch. It's up on YouTube. It's called Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. It's out of the UK. You want to understand how the government works? Go watch a couple of those. They're great. They're comedy, but they're based on how it actually works. And you think that by voting for a guy and he's going to make a change, things are going to get done. Boy, oh boy.
Well, I'm a firm believer in the power of the vote within a system that is not corrupt. But I don't believe at this point that there is, right now, our system is an illegal system, so we have no power of the vote. So keep it simple for my redneck brain is we can't vote our way out of this. There is no possible way, because it's just going to be twisted and corrupted in one way, shape, or form. So we have no power in our votes at this point in time. Our votes are a fraud. Whether we like it or not, they're being used fraudulently.
Well, and there's also the Littlechild case, don't forget. Willie Littlechild was elected to office in 1990 with an 80%, literally a landslide victory, sent him to Ottawa on the ticket that he said he would vote against the GST. And he got there and he voted for the GST, so his constituents took him to court, and the judge said, well, the only thing that you can do is when the next election cycle comes around, just don't elect Willie and elect the next guy that lies to you.
Yeah.
That
basically took that was the last shred of culpability or accountability that was given away to the system. So from that point forward, there could never be any trust in the system. And unfortunately, as a species, people don't tend to not learn their lesson until the price they pay is high enough. So here we are on the edge of Canada becoming a completely pirated and cleaned out, pillaged nation. People are finally learning enough to, or willing to learn enough because the price we're paying is so steep. How far back can we base an argument for odious debt on
from the beginning
from the
when it
beginning?
started. Now, here's something that we need to clarify here first. The debt that they've created is called fiat currency debt. And fiat currency is created, as you know, from thin air. Well, not even thin air. It's created from nothing. There's nothing backing fiat currency today in the system that we have. The Federal Reserve notes denominate as the US dollar. That's a global reserve currency from the Federal Reserve. They don't come out of the US Treasury. And the bank notes that we get from the Bank of Canada are done in a very similar fashion. They're created from nothing. Their system is collapsing. Their system is going the way of the dodo bird. And that's why there's this whole push for this great reset. And what they want to do is introduce a new fiat currency to swap out from the old fiat currency. Now, of course, they're going to get 1-to-1 on the exchange, and all the debt will be at 1-to-1, except the money in your account will come in at 100-to-1. So you have $100, you get one new dollar. But the debt won't change that you owe. It'll go across at 1-to-1. And this is what they call the reset for total enslavement of all the people across the world. Now, we know it's not going to work, and they actually know it's not going to work because of this is what they're doing now. This whole COVID thing started to fall apart. So they brought in Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter whole thing now is starting to fall apart because Black Lives Matter was incorporated in Delaware on November the 9th, 2016, and it got all this money from corporate entities, Nike, Starbucks, the Ford Foundation gave them $100 million. So it's nothing but more corporations doing false flag work, and the people are finding this out. Remember, okay, so fiat currency, where does that fiat currency work? It works in an admiralty maritime jurisdiction. When I talk about creating constitutions, we're talking about bringing common law back, or law of the land. And under law of the land, the admiralty jurisdiction fiat currency is junk. It's monopoly money. It has no value. It's not there. We transition from the fiat currency through transitional clauses to the species money because it takes time to build that into a treasury, et cetera, so that people, and I'm looking at this as the common people. I'm not looking at this as the banker's debt. I'm saying the common people in their bank accounts and in their savings accounts and their RRSPs and their pension funds, et cetera, that money, the banker's debt, excuse my language, but screw them. They can have it. They created it out of nothing. Good, it's nothing. Walk away. There are ways that we can transition from that to a new species money. Species money means actual value, and the oldest money on the planet that we know of is gold. And yes, you can go to a gold-backed currency. You can go to an oil-backed currency. It doesn't matter, just so long as it's something that's behind it that gives it actual value rather than edict from a government called legal tender acts.
Yeah, I printed a pretty picture, call it value. Yeah.
And the nice thing is, and people come to me all the time, well, Doug, the UN is taking our land. The provincial governments are selling land to China. And I said, cool, are they taking it in allodial? Are they getting allodial title? Are they getting land patents for it? And they go, well, no. I said, great, because you sit law of the land, you hold allodial title. If the UN puts claim on the land and they don't have allodial title, that land claim is null and void. I said, the Chinese, the same thing. It's null and void. If they're holding in fee simple, and we come back to common law of the land, because we are the allodial title holders, all of those contracts become null and void.
So in again, redneck speak, I hear that, and I'm thinking, okay, while they've been busy selling off Canadian assets for a nickel on the dollar when they continually make our economy and nation go through these manufactured roller coasters of value, and then they come in and they buy us up at a nickel on the dollar. If the Canadian people were to take their nation back, those assets would be returned back to the people.
Well, and when you're dealing with it, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you're dealing with an illegal and unlawful de facto entity, that's like buying a car from the mafia that they just stole from your neighbor and then sold to you.
Exactly.
And that's really what's happening here. So any contracts that they have entered into, even though the other side entered into it in good faith, it doesn't make any difference because they were dealing with the mafia. And you can't buy your neighbor's car from the mafia guy because he doesn't have title. They don't have, remember, no land under their feet, no allodial title. We, the people, have the allodial title. And what does allodial mean? I get this. Do you know what allodial is? You want me to tell you?
Tell us. Please tell us.
Allodial title is the purest, cleanest title to land or anything that you can have. In land, it means that you own the land from the soles of your feet to the center of the earth, from the top of your head to the outer reaches of the atmosphere. And only men and women can hold allodial title. Fictions cannot.
Excellent. I have learned again. I have learned more. And wow, I not only see a way that we could agreeably end the suffering, but also return the riches of our nation back to the rightful ownership, which is us. There is no reason Canadians should be suffering in any way, shape, or form by any stretch of the imagination.
Our pension funds should be gold-plated. We wouldn't have homelessness. We own the assets, the in-ground assets, the above-ground assets. They belong to we the people. Can you imagine having us with a proper governance controlling those assets and how that money gets spent properly for we the people? There would be no more homelessness. There would be no more old age homes for pensioners that lock you up in a room and tie you to your bed. That's disgusting. But that's what happens when you get into the government housing of old age pensioners. And the tract housing here in Toronto, we have the Toronto Housing Authority, and those places are, if you ever go, a lot of them are just terrible. They're infested with bed bugs, there are cockroaches all over the place, and the government doesn't do anything.
No.
So those are for the lower income people. So how about we get our assets back? We don't have any more lower income people, because once you get your assets back, now you create an economy that is booming. You don't need to put any taxes on anything. Why? You can't tax a sovereign anyway, so you wouldn't be collecting income tax. What companies wouldn't want to come in where they didn't have to pay taxes or collect taxes from the working people? Suddenly you got your paycheck, and it was whatever hours you worked, you got in hours you worked. How good of an economy do you think we'd have?
It's mind-boggling to me. I mean, when I just look at simple numbers that I have taken a look at in research from different perspectives, when I look at when the family structure went from one breadwinner to two breadwinners, and the taxes that went with it, and our birth rates that dropped, and our quality of life that fell apart, and all of the social family structure that has disappeared to support this never-ending voracious monster called our de facto government. What kind of life would Canadians had if they weren't paying more than half of their income from both of the working people to the government? I mean, we would have, and I've brought this up to so many parents that, would you have had twice as many kids if you weren't both having to work and paying away, more the lion's share of your income? And absolutely. So, I mean, there again, just in that alone, the robbery has forced this requirement for a diverse migration to Canada to cover the butts of these criminals, again, that are frauding us and covering up the value in the assets that are should be actually prospering, making Canadians' lives prosperous. All of these cover-ups have costs.
Well, and could you imagine a education system that are run by the parents? Because the parents write the checks to the teachers. And if the teachers decide that they want to bring a drag queen in to teach their 6-year-olds about LGBTQ, how long do you think parents would allow that to go on?
Or convicted pedophiles being heads of education boards in entire provinces and cities. This is monstrosity at its finest to me. Academia has been so corrupted by the sheer desperate need of babysitters for our kids, because they don't have the time to pay attention and know what these kids are being taught. And these babysitters are busy poisoning the kids throughout them through these extremely...
So the power belongs in the hands of the parents anyways on how their children need to be educated. That's a parental deal, not mine, not yours, but parents. You're a parent. You had kids. Isn't it your job to ensure that your children are properly educated? Don't just drop them off in the schoolyard and keep your fingers crossed.
Isn't it our parents' right to protect their children?
Absolute right. Period.
But yet we have our government trying to legislate parents from protecting their children from gender reassignment.
Well, and I said, okay, so the British North American Act is what they claim they're under, right? So within the British North American Act, Section 92 deals with provinces. And under Section 92, I believe, I'm not sure, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's Section 11, actually only allows the province to create a marriage ceremony, and that's it, period. Nothing more than not even issue a marriage certificate, but actually only do a marriage ceremony. That's the only thing they have the ability to do. They don't have the ability to interfere in divorces, interfere with children, nothing. Yet nobody challenges this. This is what they call their constitution. This is a constitutional challenge. Where do you get the chutzpah to stick your nose in my family's business when all you have by your own documentation is the ability to perform a marriage ceremony, and that's it?
Well,
therefore, with the lack of knowledge, people go, and that's the problem. They've been two parents working, latchkey kids. Who has time to do this research? Who has time to go look this stuff up? Who has time to get involved in the administrative office? Because that's what these are. These are not courts of law. These are courts of color of law, or administrative offices for the corporation. And they tie you up and they suck your labor off of you. Let's talk for a second about unalienable rights. There's a term that's been bandied about. Some people at the UN call them human rights, and because they're inalienable, but they've corrupted inalienable to mean privileges granted by the UN, the same way that human rights are privileges granted by an organization or a government. And if you look up the word human in the Ballantyne's Dictionary, 1948, it says monster. And when you look up monster in that same dictionary, it says human being. So what is that? That's a sub-man. Oh, well, that would be a slave with rights and privileges. How wonderful is that? But unalienable rights are God-given. And they can only be taken by the entity that gave them to you, the creator. You can't even give them up. So how do they get around stealing your labor? By making you believe that you are the fiction that they've created, from your birth certificate, your driver's license, your passport, your health card, your credit cards, your bank account. All of this is dealing with nothing more than a fiction that you may claim is you.
So how can people stop the fiction? I mean, how do we travel without using this fiction character? How do we?
Well, that's the problem, and we have the solution. But there's lots of remedy out there. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. Some of it works some of the time, some of it works other times, et cetera, et cetera. But there's only one solution, and we've had it since 1931. And then Trudeau made it even better for us in 1982 we have to hold constitutional conventions, elect our delegates, create a constitution, ratify a constitution, and seat a de jure government. And I kid you not, it is, look at Iceland, they did it in 30 days.
I am so inspired by what they did, and that's the last thing in the world they want us talking about here in Canada. They went from being in the same financial situation we're in, basically, to being debt-free nation and thriving again in under 3 years. They went through the pain. It took them 3 weeks to unseat the government,
Yep.
or less, and then they carried on with an interim government, created a constitution. They're not quite the hero story the last 4 or 5 years.
No.
They've gone extremely progressive leftist as well.
Well, they also made an error. They went to the Supreme Court to do the final ratification on their new constitution. They didn't create a new Supreme Court within the Constitution. They left that out of the Constitution, and now it sits to this day in front of that court. They refuse to vote on it.
This is an excellent case point for Canadians to study, to reaffirm exactly that this is possible and it is doable, and it does not have to be painful. I mean, this could be done, and we could be prospering in less time than another 4 years of Trudeau.
Well, and all you need is one province to do it, and the rest of the province, because once you bring law of the land back on the land, the rest of the provinces and the federal government go the way of the dodo bird. They have no standing. Now, if let's say we'll go to Alberta, they seat a de jure government under a constitution. Saskatchewan then has to do it. British Columbia then has to do it. All of the provinces then have to do it. They're now under the gun. Don't think for a second that Alberta won't help. They will.
Apparently want to be Canadians, and then this is what my experience going, coast to coast as many times as I have in the last couple of years, is it's just
there's nothing stopping us from, once we seat de jure, same way the 13 original states got together and created a constitutional convention in 1787 in Philadelphia that created the U.S. Constitution. Don't forget that those 13 states were sovereign nations unto themselves. And they sat de jure through their own constitutional conventions after the war, and then they did the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia that created the U.S. Constitution. There's nothing stopping us from doing exactly that. If all the provinces seat de jure and then they say, okay, we're now going to go and hold a federal constitutional convention with elected delegates, and we're going to create a federal constitution so that Canada actually becomes a sovereign nation.
Well, in this is becoming a real hot spot and a hot seat, and it's starting to expose more of the cover-up and the politicians. And the perfect case in point on that is Mr. Kenney's outlash this week about labeling them as separatists and basically as traitors, that if they don't support all of Canada. And this is actually the pressure of the people pushing for a de jure government, which is a legal government, and trying to hold a constitutional referendum in Alberta. And I covered a lot of that. And when Kenney says separatists, he wants people to portray that everybody is as off the hook or is on the Wexit train. That is not at all what Kenney is referring to. Kenney does not fear the Wexit party. He fears a de jure government push for constitutions in Alberta because he can't stop that. He can't stop the truth. He can propagandize Wexit all he wants, but he can't make liars out of the truth with the push for constitutions.
I watched a live stream with Cody Holler today, talking to the Wexit people, and he said, how are you guys going to handle the Clarity Act? How are you going to get around that? And the guy was, I tell you, it was like a cat on a hot tin roof. It was funny to watch his response because he couldn't.
So now one of the questions here that came up here a little bit ago, and I apologize to whoever it was that posted that out there, that people are finding really offensive, is the video. You may have seen it with the Parliament in Quebec the yard completely covered with UN flags. How can we explain that?
I have no idea. I know the French people are crazy. Good crazy, most of them. Every French person that I've ever met from Quebec is crazy, but good crazy. I haven't, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up Quebec's ass by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure you have bad people as well, but I haven't met any over the years. But they are crazy. So it doesn't surprise me that they would do something like that. And maybe they were setting it up for a bonfire for all we know, and the cameras turned off and then they lit them all on fire because they were I don't know. I mean, really.
I'm at a loss for this as well. I thought maybe you might have some insight into what they could be trying to achieve by signifying the support of the UN in such a way. I don't get it.
Yeah, but was it a support of the UN, or did the guy who was taking the pictures and then he turned off the camera and then they came back and burned all the flags, but he wasn't there to watch that. He was just like, oh, look at this. They put all these UN, and the guys had to go get gasoline. They were gone for half an hour and they came back.
Wishful thinking, I hope. But
once again,
I've seen photographs. I mean, at all the border crossings, we're seeing this desensitization, this normalcy, this push towards normalcy of accepting UN flag flying over us. Personally, I find that incredibly offensive, but that's something that gets cleaned up along with us unseating this illegal government, because that could end all of those agreements and treaties and non-binding garbage lies that they keep enforcing us on, and writing laws to comply with these non-binding agreements. And these
color of law.
What's that?
Color of law, not actual law. Law only creates under law of the land. Law of the sea, you have color of law, or statutes, rules, etc., etc. And usually they're victimless crimes. There's no victim on the other side. The queen sticks herself in as the victim, and she's a fiction as well. So be careful. I find language, people get caught up, and that's why I'm very precise when I speak about certain things, Wayne. I mean, you've seen my videos, and I've gotten after certain interviewers about, well, that's not the correct words to be using for this and that, or the correct, and it really is important because we're dealing with what we call law here. And a constitution is just that. It is a creation of a social contract in law. And so we have to be precise with the language. In common law, we have to use proper, lawful language, which, if we're going to use English, then that's what it will be. But it must be created in a form that everybody understands, not just the attorneys, because the attorneys won't be around when we seat a de jure on the land government, because they deal with color of law only. They're attorneys, they're law society, they're bar carded. They belong to England. We can send them back. What do they call 500? What do they call 500 attorneys at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean?
A good start.
Yeah.
Well, so for me, then I'm saying, okay, they're writing words in Crayolas, and we're going to bail for it, and we're going to bail for it.
Exactly.
Unlawful agreements.
Correct, and that's really what it is. They're using crayons. It's disgusting, but that's what people have been conned in, and really they have been conned into believing. I was doodling around on a piece of paper today. I just want to read you something because I write now. So cognitive dissonance. We all know what cognitive dissonance is, and most people don't want to believe that there is this much evil in the world, and that it's generational.
Yeah, there is. These guys, and actually, interestingly enough, we're not the only ones that know about this strategy, this generational strategy that was first laid out in a book in the late 1800s and translated to English in 1905 that lays this all out. And today I actually watched a video of an imam in Beirut somewhere describing all of this in 1985.
Yep.
They know too that they are being robbed and pillaged and used as pawns of war in all of this cover up. So when I say this cover up is the biggest in Canadian history, it is, but it's also a part of the biggest cover up in human history and the biggest hostile communist takeover. Science fiction couldn't write it up.
Well, people say this is a communist takeover, but the reality is that communist takeover means that they nationalize everything. All the banks become nationalized, all the companies, all the corporations become nationalized. Walmart becomes the Canadian government Walmart. Starbucks becomes the Canadian government Starbucks, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't communism. This is fascism. This is Sieg Heil, my friend, Heil, Hitler. This is fascism, period. This is the corporatocracy. This is the takeover by corporations of, and what is the Canadian federal government? A corporation. What are the provincial governments? Corporations. When I deal with a police officer here in Toronto, I ask them, so are you a policy enforcement official for the corporation known as the City of Toronto? Because that's what we have here. It's a corporatocracy. It's a fascist overthrow of we the people. And they want us to believe that we're corporations. Right. How foolish is this? Wake up, Canada. Wait a minute. That's what you do.
Right? And this is the system they need in place for the fourth industrial revolution and technocracy that's coming. This Correct. Is how we need to. This is the foundation of the next business model that will officially enslave us through all kinds of technical means that we can't even begin to fathom. It's mind-blowing.
Well, and their system is collapsing. So, and it's collapsing at I said this before. I'll say it again for your listening audience. They crossed the event horizon of the black hole in December of 2019. They've been stuffing $30 trillion a month, so from the 1st of March all the way through to this month here, June now, into this black hole. And this black hole is continuing to grow and grow and grow. And it is 2.8 quadrillion. And it's called derivatives. And if you don't think they're in big, big trouble, just watch the markets and how they're 100% manipulated now, and how they don't want you to watch certain things. Stock market goes up. Oh, pay attention to the stock market. Oh, the stock market went down. Oh, don't pay attention to that. Go look at the bond market. Oh, look at all the bonds are going up. Oh, how wonderful is this? Everything's fine. Nobody has to pay any attention to whatever's going on here. We just keep the show going. Their problem is the black hole. They've crossed the event horizon. When you cross the event horizon of a black hole, you don't pull out. There's only one way, and that's into the black hole for absolute destruction. And that's the problem we have. And that's what saddens me the most, is most people are going to wake up one morning and it's all over.
This is why we're seeing the escalation in everything. They can't suck enough, fast enough to keep feeding their, afterburners to try and stay out of the black hole. So they want to carry it on. I mean, it's just like, Captain Kirk getting sucked into the black hole. More thrusters, Scotty! And there's nothing more. There's nothing more to pull, and the people are not willing to give any more thrusters to them.
Well, and the Federal Reserve has been printing, like I say, $30 trillion a month, putting it off, and it's called off-balance sheet money, so it doesn't show up on the commercial bank's balance sheet, and it's all done out of the Caribbean, down there, and it's all about derivatives. And here's what's crazy about this. So the owners of the banks aren't the bankers, right? They own the banks. But the bankers are such degenerate gamblers that they get this money to pay off their derivatives bets, and they get money coming in from other bets that paid off, and they turn around and they go bet more in the derivatives world. They're not actually contracting the 2.8 quadrillion, they're adding to it. How crazy is this? 1.5 quadrillion in 2008, 2.8 quadrillion in 2020.
I can't even fathom those numbers, to be honest with you, Doug. My hillbilly brain is used to scrounging and counting quarters, not trillions.
Well, a quadrillion is 1,000 trillion, just to give you an idea, and a trillion is 1,000 billion. So that means a quadrillion is a million billion.
And that's
Well, let's give you a little perspective. At the peak of world GDP, we were at 85 trillion. Peak GDP on a global yearly basis, 85 trillion. Today, the world GDP is somewhere between 40 and 50 trillion. That's it. So
our gross national domestic product is going down, basically because we can't afford
globally
to invest and service our own debt and thrive and grow. So they're starving us, literally.
Well, and that's why when we see de jure, we go to a species-backed money, so it's not debt-based. The difference between fiat is you discharge the debt when you push the when you pay your credit card, you're discharging the debt. But in species money, you pay the bill. In other words, the debt doesn't continue to be passed around. Fiat currency is just debt. Those are debt notes. And they're created from debt to pay debt. If you tried to pay off all the debt in the world today, there isn't enough fiat currency to do it. You'd still have a shortfall because they charge interest.
So that would really piss off the Greens, because we would have to go and cut down a few trillion more trees to print more fake money and make more Crayolas so that they could color this fake money and pass it out, and so people could line up a few wheelbarrows full for a loaf of bread in 5 years.
Well, actually, it's going to happen a lot sooner than that, but that's okay. But Canada got around that. You know what they do now? We have plastic money here, as you know. Well, they used to take all of the recycled plastic, they beat it, and then they throw it into the landfills. But now they make the money from it. It's made from recycled plastic.
Right.
Okay, so our money is created from nothing, and now we're giving you plastic from garbage.
Absolutely.
I mean, how much more? I'm sorry. I chuckle because, I find it sad, but I'd much rather laugh.
Well, it's so insane. What else can you do, right? I mean, there's nothing that'll make me laugh harder at myself than the stupidest thing that I've done that day, right? I mean, because it's just so stupid. So, I mean, what else can we do? Because otherwise we just want to go and slit our wrists, because the sheer reality of it is overwhelming, and that bus cannot stop going without us, right? So it's mind-blowing. We're getting on an hour and 10 minutes here, Doug, and I don't want to keep you all night here, and I don't want to turn into a 3-hour marathon.
No, either. God, no.
It tends to turn people off when they see a video that's way too long. So I would rather get you back in.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Why don't we tie this up right now? There's so much more we can get into.
Exactly.
Other rabbit holes we can go down. I'd be delighted to come back on your show whenever.
Yeah. There's more to there's all, and again, I want the people to understand that your site and platform is a huge resource of information. My curiosity and interest in what I'm doing and why I'm trying to bring this angle to the table is to expose more of the cover-up and the cost and the crime that is the rippling effects of all of this. And the solutions can be dealt with between the resources and the information. That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to inform the people of the cover-up of the crimes against them, the people. The reason for their suffering, the reason behind all of this is money. And this cover-up has been going on a long time. And I know there's probably good people out there somewhere in Parliament and in government, but at this point, they need to be held to account like everybody else, and they need to own up to what they know, and we need to fix this and deal with it. We've got to fix it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. By the way, everybody, and I mean everybody when I say this, has a seat at the table, and everybody has a voice. It doesn't matter that you work for the Defacto. You're still part of we the people on the land, and you have a voice as much as we have a voice. As a matter of fact, that's the greatest equality we all have. We all have a voice, and we all have a seat. And it doesn't get better than that. Not Black Lives Matter, all lives matter.
Exactly. And we are all essential.
Correct.
All right. Thank you so much, Doug, for your time. I look forward to the next installment of the biggest cover up in Canadian history. And there's more to this, guys. There's more coming out all the time. This is not a theory. This is a conspiracy, and Canadians are the victims, and it's time they were told the truth. And they're not going to get it from anywhere else except for people like us. So thank you very much for your time, sir.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you to your audience for listening to this crazy old guy for an hour and 10 minutes. Appreciate that. Appreciate them too. Without them, there isn't us, and that's just the way it is. Thank you very much, everybody, for tonight. Have a good night.
You bet. Bye for now. There, guys, was a little bit, a bit of a different spin, I think, I hope, on some of the things that are going on. I'm just a simple, average, normal guy, and that's the way I like to try and find answers to, so that I can make sense of this for everybody else, without anybody thinking that I am 100% sold or for anybody or anything. I'm about trying to be fair and make the voices and the knowledge the story. I'm not the story. I'm never intended to be the story. I don't even like being on camera. But this is the role that the man upstairs has seen fit to put me in, so I can do the best that I can to try and bring the truth in these stories to all of you amazing folks that keep us going. So I'm not going to take long on this here. I'm going to set up the next chat with Doug very quickly here. I'm just going to run this because he reminded me not to forget doing this. The only thing that keeps us going are the gifts and donations that we get from the people that appreciate and value what we're doing. So for those that do support us and help out a little bit, it's very greatly appreciated. It means more than you know, and we're going to keep going. And there's a lot more coming. There's more coming to this story, and there's more stories coming soon too. July 1st, it's when it starts. It's not a rally. It's not a celebration. It's the beginning of a movement based on truth. And it belongs to we, the people. So give us a share, give us a like, have a discussion, and we'll see you next time, folks. I love you guys all so much. Bye for now. Derek isn't with us today. He's actually out working and in Toronto, and I'm out in the Bat Cave doing the best I can and doing a lot of talking behind the scenes, trying to get people on the same page. So with that, it's 1:15. Y'all have a great night. Love y'all, and we'll see you soon, and we will keep making Canada again. It's already great, but we'll make it Canada again. Together, we the people. Bye for now.